woods, the experts are getting really animated about a process that potentially kick-started all metal production on this site. Ever since we first got here, our archaeologists have been puzzling over this great hunk of masonry in the middle of our mill pond. What is it? How old is it? None of them seem to know. But Francis has just summoned me here in his usual state of Francis high excitement. What is it?
Well, actually, Tony, this is quite urgent. That isn't just a heap of rubble. There's structure there, and that structure is potentially very exciting.
What do you reckon it is?
Well, Tony, we've got 3 stones over there which are part of a reused arch.
So what does that mean?
Well, an arch in a blast furnace is where they blew the air into it.
What sort of date?
About 1650.
How do we prove it, Jerry?
We've got 3 bits of evidence. The first is this large sheet of basically furnace lining, where the slag inside the furnace has attacked the clay lining of the furnace. It is far too big for any other structure, I think, other than a blast furnace. The second piece of evidence is blast furnace slag. We've been turning up this green blast furnace, which is typical of charcoal blast furnace, in small amounts consistently from here. And thirdly, and most importantly, we've got metal. Now, if I can take a sample of this and prep it very quickly, then I might be able to actually resolve whether it is actually cast iron. And if it's cast iron, this is definitely a blast furnace.
So the urgency is that you want to get that under the microscope before we finish tonight?
Yeah.
Go on then. It's now a race against time to get this metal processed and say whether it's from a blast furnace or not. Luckily, the cavalry's arrived to help Jerry out.
Joking aside, this is hard work.
It is.
I mean, being realistic, Jerry, we got an hour. Are we going to get a result, do you think?
We'll get as far as we can. I mean,
Yeah.
basically, what we'll do is, once we've got to this grit, we'll go and have a look at it under the microscope.
When we get it to the microscope, how do you distinguish between cast and wrought iron?
What we're hoping for is that we'll be in a sufficiently well-prepared state to see a certain microstructure. Now, what comes out of the charcoal blast furnace is a thing called grey cast iron, and that's got one characteristic feature, which are little flakes of graphite, and these should show at this level of preparation.
So it's fingers crossed, isn't it, mate?
Just fingers crossed.
Yeah. Graphite flakes, graphite flakes, graphite flakes, graphite
Francis has gone mad.
flakes.
I don't even know what graphite flakes are. I just hope they find some. In Stuart's trench, he's found something that might just prove his crazy theory about a mill.
Ian was clearing down there. I was giving up on this, to be honest. But just last thing, we have a wall.
So that's the edge of a wall of a stone building or something?
Yep, the other facing edge is just coming underneath the section here. So it's a big old wall. That's a substantial stone wall, and it's different from all the other walls we've looked at as well, because it's not fine. It's not that sort of layered stone. I mean, these are boulders that they're using here.
To me, this all points that you've got this early mill here. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think Ian deserves a
pint.
A pint.
A pint.
Yeah. I'll let you buy me. I'm a Yorkshireman.
Fair enough, Stuart. I take my hat off to you. This discovery is evidence that Derwentcote evolved from a site using water power to grind corn to a site harnessing that water to produce metal. Question now is whether Jerry and Francis can prove whether we've found that first metal process.
Jerry, I can't wait, mate. Well, any graphite flakes? Graphite flakes, please.
Do you know what graphite flakes look like?
Show me.
Now, those are, I suspect, graphite flakes. I'm reasonably confident.
Great. So if you add that to the size and shape of the furnace lining and to that cast iron slag, then it really looks like we've got a blast furnace, doesn't it?
I would say for definite, quite honestly.
OK, well, that's fantastic.
It's superb.
It's
been hard work.
I am so over the moon.
Good. Well, take the message.
What a result. We've proved that before the pond was here, it was home to a blast furnace. It pushes iron-making on this site back to the 1650s, almost a century earlier than previously thought. We've only got about half an hour left, Francis. What do you reckon we've learnt from the trenches we've put in?
I could tell you in 2 hours. I mean, we have learnt so much. We got how people lived, how they worked. No, it's all there. And, of course, it all fits together. That's the great fun of this. I mean, I know I'm sometimes rude about Stuart, but he helps cement landscapes together.
We came here looking for an iron and steel works, but what we've uncovered is a mini industrial revolution. Derwentcote might have been overtaken by big cities, but metals developed and perfected here changed the very world we live in today. Not bad for 3 days' work. The Grace Dieu heralded the end of the great clinker ships. By the time Henry VIII launched the Mary Rose nearly 100 years later, the old clinker technology had given way to a radically different carvel design, using parallel boards fixed edge to edge onto a rigid frame. This morning, Francis and Stuart started to look for the medieval shoreline in Bursledon. One of their targets was the remains of a storehouse near the old dried-up creek. Francis, I reckon this must be the most impressive rhubarb plant in England. Hope your archaeology is as exciting.
Well, actually it is, Tony. This is the storehouse. We've gone down and we've hit lots of rocks. And I think these are footings for walls or something like that. We don't know what date they are. But next door, right, dug a little hole and came up with this. Now that makes me very excited. It's a bit of pottery dated about 1450. So that is right on the money for the Grace Dieu. And then we've also found in that trench a large-headed nail that could be something to do with ships, but we don't know for sure yet.
What does it tell us?
Well, what it tells us is what Bursledon is in the late 15th century. Bursledon seems to be, I mean, I think we're right in our original assumptions, between there and just beyond the main road which exists today. So that's the Bursledon of the 16th century with the creek out in front of it.
So if Stuart's right, this dried-up creek just by the church could have been at the heart of medieval Bursledon and the centre of a royal shipbuilding business which would grow and diversify for centuries to come, or at least until the railways came along. Carenza has discovered that the practicalities of building the Grace Dieu were astounding. It's a remarkable testament to the courage and ambition of those medieval shipwrights.
I mean, what's really struck me is the sheer quantities of everything that was required to build it. I mean, there's thousands of gallons of tar and pitch are needed to waterproof it, 38 tons of rope for the sails, never mind anything else for the sails. There's 23 tons of iron required to make 52,000 pounds of nails. That's just the nails on the ship.
And that's without the acres of timber that you need to hold together.
I mean, the figures for that are unbelievable, aren't they? 2,735 oak trees, 1,145 beech trees. Now, at £1.50 per tree, you know, that's over 6,500 tonnes of wood. Just moving that around must have been phenomenal. And that doesn't include all the timber that came from abroad.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, some of it came from the Baltic. You've got wainscot boards, and you've got regolds, which are timber from Riga, and you've got Prussian deal, which again is all from the Baltic, coming into the East Coast ports here.
And then there's the fitting out, the anchors. It's got 24 anchors, and the largest one is 17 feet high.
That anchor had a name. It was called Tinctor, and it survives in the royal accounts right up to the time of Henry VII.
Over the 3 days, we've discovered a lot more about the Grace Dieu. From the sonar geophysics, we think that she measured about 120 feet long at the keel. And when you take into account the overhanging bow and stern, she was probably longer than 200 feet. And there's no doubt that she was very broad, over 50 feet at the widest point. John's discovered a lot of new technical information, from the length of the hull planking to the sizes and arrangement of the stern timbers. As a ship, we can't say if she was a success or a failure, because through no fault of her own, the Grace Dieu was a battleship without a war. There's no doubt that if she'd gone out in anger, she could have overpowered her enemies, but would she have lasted the ravages of the wind and the sea? That we shall never know. This morning, Mick was confident we'd find workshops and industry along the edge of this creek, and we have, roughly 16th century from the Tudor period. But the 12th and 13th century settlement of St Osyth is still as elusive as ever. In the first trench we opened yesterday afternoon, we found a cluster of mysterious rubbish pits, and now the trench is finished, Mick's delighted.
We've got evidence of buildings in here. Can you see the sort of light-coloured patch across that area there?
Can I get in?
Yeah.
When you say light-coloured patch, you mean this?
What's
that?
That's mortar. So there's been a wall or a wattle and daub structure there.
Yeah.
There's a cobbled surface outside it. Look where the smaller stones
This
are.
kind of pea-gritty thing.
That's right. That's
Here,
not natural. And then behind you, we've got a post hole in the bottom of a trench that's going away from you that's full of oyster shells.
Yeah.
Oysters, of course, important part of the diet then, not quite the luxury we think of today.
So does that mean we've got a building?
Yeah, we've got a building here.
Or an oyster bar?
Well, we've got a building, you know, one of probably many that went across the site.
But we've got no date.
Well,
we have. I mean, most of the pottery that's coming from these features is 15th century.
Then we're no nearer finding the medieval than we were, are we?
Yes, we are, because we've got lots of residual pottery. That's earlier pottery that's mixed into later features. And we've got everything from the 11th century through to the 15th century. We've got the full range of medieval pottery. Not only that, we've got imported stuff. We've got things like this. That's part of a 13th century French jug. This is exactly the sort of thing we'd expect to see in an East Coast medieval port.
but you see, he's got this silly grin on his face. They hadn't told you the best yet.
Go on.
We've got a major bonus, which is this.
Why is this a bonus?
It's a piece of a Middle Saxon German wine jar.
Is that common?
It's very rare. The only sort of places you find these are in Middle Saxon ports, again, mainly on the east coast of England.
So are we saying that in the 800s or 900s someone in Germany was importing wine or beer or whatever right to here?
Yeah, it was important enough for a German merchant to come up the creek, bringing this sort of thing with them.
So given the evidence that we've got, and it's not comprehensive, is it? Are you prepared to say that we've got a Saxon settlement?
Oh, I think so, yeah. We've got a complete range of the pottery. We've got structures which almost certainly go on in each direction. That's enough to show us we've got a settlement of that early medieval period.
So our elusive St Osyth settlement is elusive no more. The earliest occupation started down by the river, and this would have been a busy port in Saxon times. We're sure that the mysterious timbers that Alan Williams brought us here to see were part of a dock or slipway used to load and unload cargo. But the terrible flood of 1663 would have devastated the waterfront at St Osyth and wiped out many small businesses. The shipwrights, sailmakers and blacksmiths would also have lost their houses, and the old port of St Osyth would have changed forever. Ours is the story of two towns, the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots. We've got in the Priory people like Brother Mick deep in prayer and contemplation. In the posh house we've got Lady Carenza feasting on imported pottery, looking down on the plebs like Phil and I, eating ordinary people's food and trying to scratch a living.
Hello, my name's John Gator. Time Team is fan-funded by Patreon. This vital support helps us to make new episodes. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models and masterclasses, plus lots more.